You're watching FISM News.
The onslaught of coronavirus across Europe is taking its toll, but the deadly pandemic is having some unexpected positive side effects as well. Air pollution has decreased in urban areas across Europe during the lockdowns to combat the coronavirus, according to new satellite images shown on Monday. Cities including Brussels, Paris, Madrid, Milan, and Frankfurt showed a reduction in average levels of noxious nitrogen dioxide over March 5th to 25th when compared with Sentinel-5 satellite images of the same time period last year. In Madrid, EEA data showed average nitrogen dioxide levels decreased by 56% week on week after the Spanish government banned non-essential travel. Air pollution can cause exacerbated lung cancer, pulmonary disease, and strokes, and causes around 400,000 premature deaths each year in Europe, according to the EEA. President Donald Trump extended his stay-at-home guidelines on Sunday until the end of April. The move meant dropping his previously expressed hopes to get the economy up and running by mid-April. The reversal by Trump came as the U.S. death toll topped 2,460 from the respiratory disease, according to a Reuters tally, with more than 141,000 cases, the most of any country in the world. The peak, the highest point of death rate, is likely to hit in 2 weeks, Trump told a coronavirus briefing in the White House Rose Garden. He told Americans, "The better you do, the faster this whole nightmare will end." Asked during the briefing about previous statements on lifting restrictions by mid-April, Trump said it was just an aspiration, and said he now believed the country could be on its way to economic recovery by June 1st. While coronavirus is keeping citizens in most European countries at home, Venice Canals are seeing an unforeseen positive side effect of the widespread lockdowns. The famous canals, which are usually filled with thousands of tourists and residents in pollutive motorboats, are now crystal clear after the Italian government closed the country to foreign tourists and told Italians to stay at home. Swans, groups of fish, and dolphins like you see here are among the types of wildlife that have been spotted recently in the clear canals.
Restrictions to contain the coronavirus prevent millions of Mexicans from making daily trips north across the U.S. border, including many who work in U.S. businesses. At least 4 million Mexicans residing in cities along the 1,954-mile border have been hit hard by the restrictions on non-essential travel. The measures effectively invalidate visas, allowing short crossings into U.S. cities to visit family, get medical care, or shop. The coronavirus restrictions prohibit all non-essential travel across the border. However, the restrictions have not been widely imposed on U.S. citizens traveling to Mexico. Before the coronavirus restrictions, over 950,000 people entered the United States from Mexico on foot or in cars on a typical day, according to 2019 U.S. Customs and Border Protection Agency data. Andrew Seeley, president of the Washington-based Migration Policy Institute, said limiting transport to contain the epidemic was understandable, but in cities such as San Diego or El Paso, businesses that really should be open in the middle of a crisis might find that they don't have employees. Defining the types of businesses affected, Seeley said, "We're talking about farm work, we're talking about caregiving, and probably food production like canning and warehousing operations." The U.S. Department of Homeland Security said the measures would not disrupt critical supply chains.
On Friday, the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency unveiled measures to help oil refineries cope with fallout from the coronavirus outbreak, including waiving anti-smog requirements for gasoline and extending the deadline for small facilities to show compliance with the nation's biofuels law. The outbreak has touched off a massive global decline in demand for motor fuels and forced companies to reduce staffing levels to slow infection rates. Typically, U.S. fuel dealers are required to stop selling winter-grade gasoline on May 1st as summer anti-smog standards come into play. But marketers will now be allowed to sell the fuel until at least May 20th and possibly beyond. EPA Chief Andrew Wheeler said in an interview, "The reason we have to do this is because people are driving fewer miles and the winter blends are stockpiled in all the tanks. There's no place to put the summer blend." The EPA will also extend the deadline for small oil refineries to prove their compliance with the Renewable Fuel Standard, the law that requires refineries to blend billions of gallons of biofuels like ethanol into their fuel or buy credits from those that do. Refiners are typically required to prove their compliance by March 31st, but facilities with less than 75,000 barrels of the daily processing capacity will be given extensions. The EPA outlined the move in a press release saying, investigating and initiating enforcement actions against small refineries that were previously subject to an exemption is a low priority for the agency. Hospitals in the New York City area have been overrun with patients suffering from COVID-19. One sign of hope in the city's fight against the virus sailed into dock on Monday. New York cheered the arrival of a 1,000-bed U.S. Navy hospital ship. The Comfort, as it's named, will treat non-coronavirus patients, including those who require surgery and critical care, in an effort to free up other resources to fight the virus. From the Midtown Manhattan Pier at the ship's arrival, New York City Mayor Bill de Blasio said it's a wartime atmosphere and we all have to pull together.
President Donald Trump told a White House briefing on Monday that more than 1 million Americans have been tested for the coronavirus. 1 million people accounts for less than 3% of the U.S. population. While the United States has ramped up testing after a series of setbacks, it still lags countries like Italy and South Korea on a per capita basis. During this press briefing, however, the FDA Administrator, Dr. Stephen Hahn, and President Trump announced a new 5-minute COVID-19 testing device from Abbott Labs. Hahn said that the device produced by the Chicago-based lab would normally take 12 months to come to market, but with support from the FDA and the White House, it has been approved in just weeks. The test will soon be available in clinics, emergency rooms, and drive-through sites. Food for Heroes is an initiative that restaurant owner Hugo Rodriguez launched in Spain in order to feed doctors and nurses who are fighting COVID-19. The initiative is now established in several major cities as well. Spain went into lockdown on March 14th, and the Grosso Napolitano chain that Rodriguez co-founded began delivering to hospitals a few days later. Rodriguez speaks on the initiative itself. "It's meant a great deal to me. I feel we business people have a responsibility." He goes on to say, "Each one of us brings our little grain of sand. Our chefs pick the toppings of Medic's pizzas as they prepare them. People have asked if they can donate homemade cakes. There's this very lovely feeling that everyone forgets who they are and works together to get out of this as soon as possible." Rodriguez now makes around 40 pizzas free of charge for medical staff every day that are delivered by volunteer couriers. Deliveries are contact-free and companies supply masks, gloves, and sanitizer to volunteers.
A Swiss distillery has converted its production of Pear schnapps to make disinfectant hand gel for use against the coronavirus. This is one of the countless examples of a pattern of innovation companies are using around the world to stay open. Morand Distillery, a family-run business founded in 1889, is using up its stocks of Pear Williams, a colorless spirit made from pears grown in the orchards below the Swiss mountains. The solution they're producing follows the standards and recipe of the Geneva-based World Health Organization. Each liter requires about 17.5 pounds of pears. Like many distilleries around the world, Morand is lending its supplies to help stem the Alpine nation's rush for sanitizer. They are producing it themselves to supply to smaller businesses, as well as making several thousand liters of Pear Williams liqueur available below cost to laboratories making gel. Sadly, half the factory's 50 staff have already been laid off. Morand is doing what it can to stay afloat, using resources for the new demand amid the global COVID-19 pandemic.
Meet Tommy, the robot nurse. Tommy is one of 6 new robots helping doctors and nurses care for coronavirus patients at the Circolo Hospital in Varese, a city in the northern Lombardy region that is the epicenter of the outbreak in Italy. Dr. Francesco Dentali, director of intensive care at the hospital, told reporters on Wednesday, "It's like having another nurse without problems related to infection." The child-sized robots with large blinking eyes are wheeled into rooms and left by a patient's bedside so doctors can look after others who are in more serious conditions. They monitor parameters from equipment in the room, relaying them to hospital staff. The robots have touchscreen faces that allow patients to record messages and send them to doctors. Most importantly, Tommy and his high-tech teammates allow the hospital to limit the amount of direct contact doctors and nurses have with patients, thus reducing the risk of infection. The robots also help the hospital limit the number of protective masks and gowns staff have to use, which have become rare commodities. Tommy and his fellow robot nurses have one more advantage. They are not subject to exhaustion. A quick charge of batteries, and they are back at work in the ward.
The U.S. Treasury Department and the Internal Revenue Service backtracked on Wednesday and said Social Security beneficiaries who are not typically required to file returns for their taxes would receive their payments after all. According to the Treasury Department, these beneficiaries will not need to file an abbreviated tax return to receive the economic impact payment of $1,200. Instead, payments will be automatically deposited into their bank accounts.
Philippine President Rodrigo Duterte has warned violators of coronavirus lockdown measures that they could be shot for causing trouble and said abuse of medical workers was a serious crime that would not be tolerated. In a televised address, Duterte said it was vital everyone cooperates and follows home quarantine measures as authorities try to slow the contagion and spare the country's fragile health system from being overwhelmed. The Philippines has recorded 96 coronavirus deaths and 2,311 confirmed cases, all but 3 in the past few weeks, with infections now being reported in the hundreds every day. Duterte said in his address, "My orders to the police and military: if there is trouble and there's an occasion that they fight back and your lives are in danger, shoot them dead."
Shoot them dead.
Is that understood? Dead. Instead of causing trouble, I will bury you. His comments came after media reports of a disturbance and several arrests on Wednesday of residents in a poor area of Manila who were protesting about sufficient government food aid. Duterte's office typically calls his remarks hyperbole to underline his point. The national police chief on Thursday said police understood that Duterte was demonstrating his seriousness about public order and that no one would be shot.
From young backpackers to retirees, some Americans are hunkering down for the coronavirus pandemic far from home in Latin America, saying they feel safer and see no point in scrambling to return. While thousands of Americans sought help from the government or private security firms to evacuate, others chose to stay, worried about what they see as a skyrocketing U.S. caseload. In Mexico, home to Latin America's largest population of U.S. citizens, U.S. Ambassador to Mexico Christopher Landau issued a plea for Americans to go home, asking those who are considering to stay to think long and hard about your personal situation. He encouraged the estimated 1.5 million American residents to register on an online system for alerts so they can be tracked in Mexico. According to researchers who studied the effect of surgical masks on the transmissions of other corona and flu viruses, face masks could help limit the spread of the COVID-19 pandemic. In the study, the use of surgical masks by sufferers significantly reduced the number of flu viruses detectable in droplets released through breathing and coughing. It also reduced the number of seasonal coronavirus strains, which are among the causes of the common cold, that are detectable in the air as suspended microdroplets. The research, published in the journal Nature, was led by Professor Benjamin Cowling at the World Health Organization Collaborating Center for Infectious Disease Epidemiology in Hong Kong. Cowling said the findings could be extrapolated to simpler cotton masks, although he noted they may be less effective. Nonetheless, the use of cotton masks could be a breakthrough of sorts, given that there is a widespread supply gap for standard surgical masks. The WHO says masks should be worn by anyone with symptoms such as cough or fever, or anyone caring for a confirmed or suspected COVID-19 case, but it still does not advise healthy people to wear them in everyday situations. Google has released its mobile phone users' location data for 131 countries, hoping that the information will show whether people are obeying the world's various lockdowns and social distancing measures. It may be the world's largest data dump available to the public and covers a span from mid-February to the end of March. The results are varied. Italy, for example, has seen a drop-off in traffic to places like shopping centers and recreational areas by 94% compared to the same time last year. California, though, the first state in the U.S. to impose a lockdown, has only seen a drop by half. Arkansas is the lowest American state, with only a 29% drop. The data also shows surges in activity at parks and grocery stores in some countries, such as the UK. Google says the info is anonymous, without names, locations of individuals, or other personal info, hoping to allay privacy concerns. But it declined to say whether any authorities had requested more info. Facebook is also sharing some location data with researchers and governments, but has not made their findings public.
Thank you for watching. This has been FISM News.